There are millions of armed servicemen and women currently in the U.S. military. Are there grounds to make a big deal over 250 of them? Well, yeah.
Or lease in the morning.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Take 2 of Breaking Better News for July, 27th, 2017. I am your host, the jaundice-skinned Simpsons-kin Max Darrett. And joining me today are the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, and the worst person at Honey Badger Okay.
I demand that you reconstruct the B word. Illustrating.
Okay.
Illustrating why I am the worst thing at Honey Badger Radio.
Yeah, you had to listen to the first take of this to understand the background behind that joke. But anyways, we're a minute in. We haven't even touched upon the subject yet. Ladies and gentlemen, we are, of course, going to talk about this bit of controversy that stirred up yesterday when Donald Trump announced via his social media that transgender people are no longer going to be permitted to serve in the U.S. military. I will quote him directly, the 3 tweets that he made via his Twitter account. Quote, after consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you. Bit of grammatical errors there, but you get the message pretty clear. On top of this, General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stated the following in a written message to his military commanders. Quote, I know there are questions about yesterday's announcement on the transgender policy by the President. There will be no modifications to the current policy until the President's direction has been received by the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary has issued implementation guidance. In the meantime, we will continue to treat all of our personnel with respect. As importantly, given the current fight and the challenge we face, we will all remain focused on accomplishing our missions. And finally, Vice Admiral Robert Burke issued a similar statement about respect to his commanders and that, quote, all currently serving TG, transgender, service members will continue to receive all necessary medical care. Now, a few statistics for you guys. Apparently, according to what I'm reading off of ABC News, there are 160 transgender sailors, less than 5 transgender Marines, and 80 transgender Army personnel that are undergoing some form of transgender transition. Now, this might lead you to believe that there are only 250 transgender members in the whole of the U.S. military. Well, there's some conflict regarding the numbers. Apparently, according to the UCLA and the RAND Corporation, they estimate that the number is actually in the tens of thousands regarding the number of transgender people in the military. Regardless, this still raises an important question for us to discuss. And I've seen a lot of people having differing opinions online, and I've actually seen, oddly enough, a lot of great debate regarding this. Not people just flinging, even though there is people flinging turds at each other, there's actually a lot of people offering up some great points, and hopefully we are here to do that today. So, Brian, you heard about this news. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that the main thing that I approach this from is the angle that whatever side of this debate you come out on, the important thing is that you try to make the best case arguments while being as, how do I put this? Without taking on this bad faith thing, because what I've noticed is when this happened, so many people who I know personally and I had respected that I thought would be able to approach this sort of stuff rationally have become completely emotionally attached to, what's happening. They have projected blame onto people. They're just losing their shit. And so I try to see it from a couple of different ways. I've discussed this with people who are more reasonable, and what I have sort of taken from this is, I think, what's most important. If you join the military, okay, first of all, joining the military is not a right. It's actually a privilege. There are lots of people who get turned away because they have conditions. That's actually the whole story of Captain America, for example. It's like you can really want to serve, but that doesn't necessarily mean you get to. Because when you go out there, and I say this, yes, as a person who doesn't have military experience, but I have spoken to people in the military. I've even had a show about the military here on Honey Badger Radio. When you go out there, it's not just about you. It's not about you at all. It's about the service you're doing for the military body, for the people in your, on your team, for your people that are in your immediate vicinity. If you are not operating at 100% capacity, then you put yourself in danger, sure, but you also put a lot of other people at risk as well. So that being the case, let's try to be objective here, okay? The problem I have with what Trump did is I don't think that it's you should ban transgendered people as a group. I think that what you should do instead is, if it's a cost issue, for example, then you have you don't have the government pay for it. Sure, I get that, because it's like, you're essentially you shouldn't be funding that with the military spending, because that's a different area, for one. Another thing is, when it comes to the transition surgery itself, maybe it shouldn't happen, because at least not while you're serving, because when you undergo the transition surgery, you're out of commission for however long it takes to recover. And that means you're not fighting you're not doing military stuff. So that's costing us time and money. So those things I get. Your ability to actually do your job should be measured on a case-by-case basis per the individual, regardless as to whether they're trans or not. So if it turns out that they are of sound mind and body and they're able to meet all the requirements, and they don't have any other, conditions, then yeah, let them serve. I don't have a problem with that. The other side of this is that within the transgender community, there is a very high suicide rate. Now, it's hard to determine whether or not this is due to the issues that come out of gender dysphoria itself, or if, it comes out of things like bullying and, whatnot. That is hard to determine. But there is a 40% suicide rate amongst transgender people, which actually doesn't change when they transition. It's still a really high rate, because this is a really tough thing to go through. Mm-hmm. And if you take that and then you put them in a military situation where there's also a really high suicide rate, right? Then you're basically making it worse for those people. So I guess I can see that side of it. And there's more to it. I know that I'm kind of oversimplifying, because we only have a limited amount of time to talk about it. But the point is that this is not as simple as most people make it out to be, which is, on the pro-trans side, it's like, Trump and his administration are just being bigots. They're closed-minded people. This is what conservatives do, blah, blah, blah. It's not as simple as that. There's definitely other factors to consider. And on the anti-side, it's not just, trans people are degenerates and they shouldn't be serving in the military and they can't do the job. It's like, no, I know that there are people that can do it. But I think that the mistake is in the phrasing, and the fact is, it's not going to get past the Supreme Court, so it's not going to happen. The Supreme Court's going to rule it unconstitutional, and what they're going to have to do is they're actually going to have to do it on a case-by-case basis, as I said. And if it turns out that, if they just do it by measuring, because they look for other sort of psychological disorders, which, by the way, trans people who tend to have gender dysphoria often have other things too, like depression and stuff. And just having depression disqualifies you from the military anyway. So if it turns out that they just do it on a case-by-case basis, which is how I think they'll probably land, because the Supreme Court's not going to go along with the way that it's phrased right now, then what's going to end up happening is it might just be that after that, a lot of trans people get turned away for reasons other than simply you're trans, therefore you're not allowed. So
exactly. Yes, don't discriminate against them on the basis that they're a part of a group, but assess them as individuals and determine whether or not the other elements that may come along with being transgender, like you said, with mental health, maybe that will affect their ability to serve in the military. But being transgender in of itself does not necessarily mean that will negatively impact your performance. Allison?
I was going to say one other thing, because I know this is going to come up in the comments section. I am aware that this is not simply limited to combat roles, but that every role within the military, whether it's combat roles or desk roles or whatever. But the fact is, even in those other roles, there are some basic qualifications they have to meet. And the I guess what they're working under is the extremely, high probability, like they're like that. I guess to them, trans people are kind of a high risk, high risk candidates, and maybe it's better to just, take them out as a whole group. But I just don't. First off, I don't think it's going to happen. Secondly, that's not how I would have done it. But thirdly, and most importantly, that doesn't mean that these people are just evil bigots. Like, this is just not the way to make these arguments, because you don't know what's in their heart. People who try to read other people's minds, they annoy me more than anything else. Try to approach this as rational as possible. Okay, I'm done. Allison?
I have depression, which is classified as a mood disorder, which means as somebody who lives with mental illness, I wouldn't be allowed to serve in the military. So the question becomes, if you're in a situation, if you have a diagnosable, like you're in the, whatever it's called, DSM, the diagnostic...
DSM-5.
DSM-5, with something that is classified as a, I don't want to say mental illness, but a mental condition, why should you have, if my mood disorder means that I can't serve, why should your mental condition mean that you serve? Like, if it's a, and here's the thing, people with depression are less likely to commit suicide than people with gender dysphoria. And I believe that's like, I think the highest statistic is 7% commit suicide successfully, which means probably about 14% attempt it. Whereas I've been hearing statistics like 45% of people with gender dysphoria attempt suicide. So we're talking about something that's got comorbidity with other illnesses or mental difficulties like depression and maybe bipolar and other stuff like that. But if it's not discrimination against people like me who live with mood disorders to say, no, you can't serve, why is it discrimination against people with other mental issues? So that's my question. And furthermore, if you're going to say, okay, transgender people can serve as long as they're not actively taking medication for their condition and don't need it immediately, because as far as I know from my research, people like me, I don't even take medication, but I will not be allowed into the military. And you can talk about this in terms of discrimination against people with mood disorders.
Yep.
And what if we look at this and say, well, hey, maybe people with depression should be allowed to serve in the military. They're perfectly capable. We shouldn't stigmatize people with mental illnesses like society does actually do. We shouldn't do that. We should allow them to serve as long as they can, well, I don't know, maybe not have to take medication actively or have active therapy for their condition while they're serving. Like, I don't see how this has become such a thing that when people say, hey, wait a second, these people are compromised in some way, maybe they shouldn't be in the military. Why it's such, like, everybody's going apeshit over the transgender people, but people like myself also aren't allowed to serve in the military. Nobody's going apeshit over that.
Not yet. They may. We may make that an issue.
It's
ableist. Should let them serve.
If they did, I would say that at the very least, if somebody who has a mood disorder is going to serve in the military, they should have it under control, and they shouldn't be reliant on medication to control their disorder if they're in a combat zone.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, it's not. This is going to sound cruel, but look, when you're in a military, it's not about you. It's about the mission, and it's about the people that are the guy next to you, on your left and the guy on your right. Like, can you guys get it done and keep each other alive?
Your individuality essentially becomes moot once you become a part of a force where everybody's life is equally valuable. And
the other thing I want to add to that is, even if I'm a situation where I'm completely stable, the potential of not becoming stable puts everyone involved with me under risk. So I would personally say, no, that's probably not a good idea. Because I don't want to be responsible for being the weak link in a chain that requires everybody to be the strong link or people die. And that's my sense of responsibility towards what I take on and what I say, okay, I can handle this, I can't handle that. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that transgender people deserve more consideration than people who are living with mental illness. Not less or more. I think we deserve the same amount of consideration.
Yeah, I think they should, just before we move on to the next topic, I think we should just treat everybody who applies to become a part of the military, just treat them as if they're on equal footing with everybody else. I think the main issue that people have is just the singling out and semantics regarding the issuance of this ban. Because, if people were being treated as individuals and not just singling out the transgender community, I don't think people would have that much of a problem. But it's because that did happen that there has been an outcry, and that's why I personally have issues with this, same with Brian, and so on. But anyways, moving on to the next topic, there's been a bit of a conspiracy theory regarding this whole transgender thing and how it might be done purposefully. I don't necessarily believe this, but it's fun just to consider nonetheless, that it was a controversy that was drummed up at the right time to sort of distract from something that some people might argue as being a lot more important. So apparently there is a bill currently going through U.S. Congress, or I don't know how the legislation or the legislative branch works there, proposing sanctions against Russia, North Korea, and Iran that was drawn up in response, apparently, to supposed meddling in the 2016 U.S. election. In response to this, the European Union President, Jean-Claude Juncker, promises that the bloc will act within days if there is no reassurance regarding the impact these sanctions might have on them. He makes a couple of quotes. One in particular, he says that America first cannot mean that Europe's interests come last. Another one, he says, new sanctions should always be coordinated between allies. This particularly involves the financing of a natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. If these sanctions were to pass through, obviously this will have negative effects on the Europeans. Also, on top of this, Foreign Ministry spokesman Martin Schaefer thinks it would be, quote, unacceptable for the United States to use possible sanctions as an instrument to serve the interests of U.S. industry policies. And if the bill wins the vote in the Senate, it will then go to Donald Trump's desk. It is unclear whether this will happen before the end of the month when Congress breaks for summer recess. I don't think it's going to happen, considering we only have 4 more days. But anyways, just on top of this, I also want to mention, just in case anybody hasn't been following the stuff regarding the U.S. and Russia and their relations, Moscow, of course, rejects the notion that they meddled in the 2016 U.S. election. They say it has no direct involvement with the eastern Ukrainian conflict, which initially sparked the initial sanctions that had been made between the U.S. and Russia. And it also maintains that the annexation of Crimea was legal. So, Allison, do you buy the idea that maybe this transgender controversy was drummed up to distract from something like this?
I think it hit just the right moment. And I think that it is significantly less importance to the world and to people's general interests in it than what's happening between the EU, Russia, and the U.S. And one of the interesting things that I find about this is just the U.S. coverage of all of this, because CNN didn't lose the opportunity to imply that Russia is now viewing Trump as not useful to them, thus strengthening the perception that there is some a collusion between Trump and Russia, which, as far as I can tell, has not been proven. And prior to this, the biggest point of contention is that there's I believe a proposed natural gas pipeline going from Russia to Germany or through Germany.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah,
and the sanctions will either prevent that from going forward, or just reduce the Russian ability to build towards that. And of course, Germany doesn't want that, and I think France is in the same position because they want to have independence from U.S. energy interests, and maybe also the Middle Eastern energy interests. So they're now in a position where the previous sanctions had been done in conjunction between the EU and the U.S. These sanctions are basically the U.S. going off on its own and deciding whatever it wants to do. And now they're really pissed off, which is like you got this triumvirate, this like Mexican standoff between these really 3 huge global powers, and nobody seems to be talking about it. Everything is the transgender issue, and it's like And the other thing is that, again, the coverage of this is, okay, so the New York Times says that Russia accuses the U.S. of politically motivated sanctions. But even the CNN reports that it was Germany who was doing so, or at least was also doing so in conjunction with Russia. So it's just fascinating to just read all of the news coverage in the U.S. over that and see how each particular outlet has its own spin to how it's going to present the information. Because they're trying to pin this how pissed off the EU is on Russia. It's like, no, they're pissed off at the U.S. And so, and let's see what else I have in my notes. Okay, so, and also this will likely go forward. The sanctions will likely go forward because the number of votes that the sanctions went past the House with was sufficient to veto any of Trump's objection. So I don't know what this is going to mean in the future, but now everybody's pissed off at everyone else. So, you guys don't have any comment on that?
No, I mean, I just shows what the fucking media is choosing to focus on, and that's really annoying because I think this stuff is important. But then again, I don't think this Congress thing is going to pass. So, and they only have like a limited amount of time, and if it gets to Trump's desk and it's like, you know, gotten that far, he's likely going to veto it or whatever.
Well,
so.
At least the information I'm getting is that he won't be able to veto because of the support that it's gotten.
Well, I don't expect that it's going to go through, but we'll see. But then the question becomes, though, why would they do this? Like, what are they acting on? Because the Russia shit, it's a nothing burger. CNN told us that.
Well, yeah. So, but here's the thing. The allegations from Germany is that the U.S. Foreign Affairs, basically, or the people who are involved in this are advancing U.S. industrial interests. So they don't want competition for the energy market, essentially. And that's the allegation from Germany. So all of this could just be a method by which the U.S. maintains its monopoly over energy. And
right.
There's that.
This is coming from. Is this coming from Merkel?
I'm not sure if it's coming from Merkel. I'm not sure.
I think it's strictly EU politicians.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts about the usefulness of these sanctions. I don't think considering the way that the U.S. market has sort of been going from a previously industrial economy to more of a service-based tertiary economy over the last 50 years, I don't really see how the logistics of these things will pan out. But anyways, the main reason why we included this story is just to give people a bit of a perspective when it comes to the stories that are really important that we have to talk about. It's not to say that the issues of transgender people are not important, and they're certainly important to us over here at Honey Badger Radio. But we, of course, need to make sure that we have a broad view, taking into consideration all the issues that we are facing at once, and then making sure that we always have an informed perspective on these issues moving forward.
Right. Well, basically, when something that's an issue that comes up that's like really emotionally charged and really controversial and sensitive in a social way, gets focused on by the media, you have to ask yourself what else is going on that you're not being shown. And I think that this is definitely something that's, it could potentially be far more impactful than the transgender issue.
Well, we've gone up over almost close to 25 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have any particular thoughts on either like one of the stories or both of these stories, make sure to leave them in the comment section below. At the end of the day, it's not what we have to say, it's what you guys have to say that matters the most. Make sure to like this video if you like the particular topics that we talked about. And if you want to see more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. We have videos coming out all week, every week. I want to thank my panelists for doing this with me again on short notice, Brian and Allison. And until next time, have a lovely, lovely day.
Shill bomb! Shill bomb! www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Go there. Become a patron.
Donate to us. We're great.
Go.
Believe me.
Except for me.
Except for Allison. She's the worst thing. She's like Rosie O'Donnell. Just terrible.
I'll leave Rosie O'Donnell. Bye, guys.